the best coverage of the Jazz, Utes, and Cougars is right here on The Zone. This is JJ and Alex, presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
I think it's key. We saw the difference it made against UCF, as well as Texas Tech. Obviously, we want to make sure that we dictate what we do and not the other team, and we play our game. And so we believe we're prepared. We have a great coaching staff that prepares us well. We trust in one another, and if we lean into what we know makes our team special, we believe that we'll be good.
This BYU basketball team trying to figure out how to get a win in the NCAA tournament, and it's a tall order. I don't care what seed line you're on. I don't care what you're trying to figure out. Dallin Hall, by the way, as you on the way back in here. Alex Keary, I'm here at Common Spirit Holy Cross Hospital in Salt Lake City. Jeremiah Jensen in Omaha, of course, covering the Cougs tomorrow in their matchup. Sam Farnsworth's going to be in Indianapolis, covering the Utah State Aggies and their potential run also, as they face off against a Big 12 team that we've seen this year in TCU. But, man, lots going on here. Our guest right now is Brian Rauff. HeatCheckCBB.com. He's nice enough to join us. He's joined us a couple times already in the offseason. Brian, first of all, the seating is all set. Do you feel like the committee got it all right?
No. No. I think that's the general consensus, right?
They screwed it up.
There's no doubt about that after watching that Virginia game last night. How did the committee get that so wrong? I mean, it was just so obvious coming into the tournament. If you're looking at the analytics, you knew they weren't very good at the end of the season. How did they miss on that when a team like Indiana State could have and should have been in the tournament?
Yeah, I don't know. And I think the maddening thing with the committee is that they used different rationales for why teams got in and then used different rationales for why teams got left out. Right? There didn't seem to be a firm standard across the board. Virginia did not have the analytics. They didn't have the resume, quite frankly, in my mind. So that was puzzling. You look at the Mountain West, where the Mountain West got seeded. It was great. The Mountain West got 6 bids. Like, that was what the conference set out to do and did it, and that should be applauded. But I don't think any of those 6 were or should be happy with where they're seated. The fact that 2 of them were in Dayton. I think the Big East had a legitimate grip, and only 3 got in. I think that was a 5-bid league. Take 2 of Seton Hall, Providence, St. John's, your choice. Some of these teams that did get bids towards the end simply aren't good enough. And Virginia is the prime example of it because they don't pass the analytics or the eye test. But I think it was alarming this year at just how off the committee was.
If you're looking at a team like BYU, we'll start there because they're the game tomorrow, and then we'll get to Utah State here. BYU facing off against Duquesne, they're looked at as obviously BYU got moved off of their probable 5 seed line to be able to match up with that Thursday-Saturday play so they don't play on Sunday, and that's something that they always have to deal with. And so, but Duquesne is looked at as a Week 11 seed to BYU's strong 6 seed. Is that kind of where you see it matching up?
Yeah, Duquesne probably is more of a 13 or 14 seed. So the fact that BYU got docked a seed line just for the days doesn't come back to bite them. In this case, it may bite them in the next round playing a 3 seed as opposed to a 4. But in this first round matchup, I think the committee understood what they did and perhaps did them a solid. There's also the argument that they had VCU penciled in there as the 11 when Duquesne won the A-10 instead of VCU. They just put Duquesne in there. From a BYU standpoint, I think you're happy with the draw. BYU's success in the tournament is going to come down to whether they're able to make threes or not, quite frankly. Because that's been the deciding factor for them all season, the way they like to play. When they have struggled, it's simply been because they have gone through ruts where their shots haven't fallen. Duquesne, though, is not somebody who, at least on paper, should be able to consistently slow them down. So I do think BYU should feel pretty confident about that first-round matchup.
Is there? Yeah, you almost answered the next question I was going to ask you, but I'm still going to ask about Duquesne. Is there anything about them that gives you the sense that they're a giant killer? Is there any reason or anything you're looking at with that team that should give BYU fans any pause or any discomfort before this game tips off tomorrow at 10:40 Mountain Time?
They are gritty and they are tough. and playing that style of basketball and style of defense can get underneath you and really disrupt things. We saw them run through the A-10 tournament. They were able to do that. Again, I would feel confident in my draw if I'm BYU, and Duquesne has the whole storyline, right, of Keith Dambrot retiring after this tournament and being this essentially being his last game. But you're looking at Duquesne, top 25 defense in the country. I had to look real quick and just see where they were nationally, but top 25 defense in the country, defend the three well. I still think BYU is more talented. However, if Duquesne is able to win this game, it's because of that pressure. The pressure is able to disrupt BYU.
Brian, before we cut you loose here, we're going to ask a little bit about Utah State and that TCU matchup that they have. The Aggies also, yep. I mean, it's like the theme of the year for us in the state of Utah. BYU overperformed compared to what their expectations were. Utah State was in that same boat with Danny Sprinkle coming in his first year and returning 0 minutes and 0 points to that roster. So what is Utah State's shot as an 8 seed taking on this TCU team? Where do you think they match up with them?
I like Utah State a lot in this matchup. We know what Utah State can do. They're one of the more well-rounded teams in the country. The three-point shooting is probably their biggest issue, just their inconsistency there. But they're playing a TCU team that is an even worse shooting team, right? TCU's physicality, I think, is something Utah State has to be worried about because TCU is a team that wants to pressure you, apply a lot of ball pressure, and then run as fast as they can and get out in transition on the other end. I think Utah State has the ability to handle that. And they're the more well-rounded team, to be honest. TCU is not a team that has had a lot of success against really high-end competition this year, the way they did last year. When we were having bubble conversations, there was a little bit of talk of why isn't TCU on the bubble? Why are we so sure TCU is in pretty solidly? I think Utah State, TCU will make you work for it. They will absolutely make you work for it, but I don't trust TCU's offense to do a ton against this Utah State defense. I think Utah State should be fine.
So if the Aggies are fortunate enough to move on and they would potentially face Purdue, who had a little bit of a rough time last year, as we remember, in the first round, but if that is the matchup, how would Utah State match up with Purdue and Zach Edey?
I think, well, the question is how you handle Edey, and more importantly, how you make Edey handle you. Right? The key to that game, I think, would be Osabor and his ability to produce and potentially make Edey run up and down the court, because you're going to have somebody who makes Edey uncomfortable. Fairleigh Dickinson was able to beat Purdue last year because of the way they pressured, and Purdue just couldn't handle the press this year. That's different this year with Purdue. They learned how to handle the press, so that Achilles heel isn't there. But Purdue has struggled this year when they've lost. They have played teams with unconventional big men who are able to stretch the court and get Zach Edey away from the basket a little bit. Utah State isn't the picture-perfect part of that, given the three-point shooting inconsistencies that I mentioned already. But I do think Osabor is somebody with his skill set who can be a real problem for Purdue and Purdue's front line. And if you take that advantage away from Purdue, you're making it essentially a toss-up in the backcourt, which I think is as good as you're going to get for anybody in the country, let alone for Utah State. And the way Utah State has come on this season, particularly late in the year, I have to think they'd take their chances with that.
Brian Rauff, heatcheckcbb.com. Go check it out. You can see the breakdown, of course, of the entire bracket. And look, just cheat a little bit off of Brian before you get your brackets all turned in. Brian, we appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.